Alright, so this is how I have mine set up. So what you want to do is you want the front to be aligned with the focal distance, and then you want the rear of the engraving to be in focal distance as well. And then I like to add a little piece of tape with the dot to make sure that it's centered. And this way, when I go to the software to frame it, I can see if it matches up. Now, I'm doing a 30-ounce tumbler because I don't need a 40-ounce dupe. I've done a few of those, but it's basically the same process, and you just want to make sure that the front lines up with the rear. Sometimes people go out of focus on some tumblers. I'm using a 2-inch lens, and you shouldn't have to go out of focus with like a 30-ounce tumbler. Okay, I don't have a better recording set up yet, but so this is going to be the design I'm going to be engraving. What I like to do is add another layer, and then just add a line that matches the circumference. And so when you go to enable the rotary, mine's a chuck. If your rotary has the stepper motor on like the opposite side, you might have to mirror the output. And then with roller, you'll obviously select roller, enable it, change steps per rotation, the diameter of your rollers, and adding in the object diameter. They say it doesn't really change anything, but as long as you add it, it also spits out the circumference a lot easier. Makes it easier for making this line here. So I'll go back to Chuck, hit OK, and then so yeah, once you make this line, then you can frame it over here and just make sure that it actually lines up. If you do what I did and you have the design in here beforehand, just go over to output and deselect it. The other thing is you can change the width and the height up here pretty easy. So like the main file might be a little different. Make sure you uncheck this so it's unlocked if you want to change stuff individually, and then we'll get to framing this line to make sure the steps per rotation actually line up properly. Oh, and another thing is what I like to do is move the laser to where it's probably like around here, just so you don't go off of grid when you're trying to engrave something. But I'll usually come in here and select this, move it to the laser position. That way it'll line up where your origin is set up. And so sometimes this can be a little tricky depending on the design, and I'm not exactly sure why, but user origin is what I like to use on the tumblers if I can. Then sometimes you might have to use current position or absolute coordinates, but it can mess up sometimes. So you might have to play around with that to make sure what works properly for you. And then so I'll go to the laser and hit the frame button to show you how that works. Okay, so I have the laser lined up on that dot. Go ahead and hit the frame button, and This way it'll tell me if it goes from dot to dot. So I went back to the dot, and then I'll go back to light burn. Alright, so I'm back at light burn. I had removed the line that we made and just adjusted this to be about that size. I did make it a little bit smaller, so it's about 1 millimeter shorter. Depending on the design, you might want to make it 1 to 3 millimeters shorter. When it comes to the preamble ones with the flag, I like to make it a little bit shorter, usually about 2.5 to 3 millimeters. I also like to keep this unchecked so I can easily adjust the sides without affecting all of it. And your settings will be a little bit different when it comes to engraving, because I have the pie burn. I can actually engrave at a really fast speed. With your laser rotary, I'm not exactly sure what your fast speed would be, but you could probably engrave at 250, possibly 300 millimeters a second if you have a one of the the clamps that holds the rotary, or sorry, holds the tumbler in place. And settings can be a little bit different. I haven't really ran a speed test and power setting on this in a while, since I've got the new rotary, and I've been doing them at 350. So like with some of the tumblers, red is usually a little bit harder to engrave, so you want to do a little bit higher power. But sometimes with the dupes, I have to go all the way up to like 50% power on mine. But when I go to engrave just a regular logo or something on the rotary, I think I can get away with like 30% power. So I have this set at 45. I also did my lines per inch, or the DPI. I usually like to have mine set at either 400 to roughly like 430, depending on how crisp I need it. And I haven't really noticed much of a difference between 400 and 430, but when I was at 430, it gave pretty clean results. So everything else should be the same. Keep bidirectional on, makes it faster. You don't want crosshatch at all. Fill shapes all at once, and then make sure it's on fill, obviously, and then have your air assist. Okay, so back to framing again, just to make sure the design is going to line up properly. Click on frame, and this time it'll like stop short about 0.5 millimeter, maybe 1 millimeter, and then just make sure that it lines up properly with the bottom, so it's not hitting the stainless steel. And I like to keep a little gap between the top and the bottom, so I'm probably going to change the height on this and just make sure that there's a little bit of gap there. And then once you're done, just turn on the laser and hit fire.